Hi, I'm Colin Diaz, President and CEO for the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. On this episode of East Valley Business Podcast, we're going to listen to a discussion on women in male-dominated industries as part of our Elevate webinar series in partnership with the City of Tempe. The panelists for this discussion are Latasha Causey with NASCAR's Phoenix Raceway, Sue Rigler with the 100 Mile Brewing, and Allison Martin, formerly with the Arizona Coyotes. All right, good morning. For those of you I have not met, my name is Colin Diaz. I have the honor of serving as President and CEO for the Tempe Chamber of Commerce. And today we are kicking off our Elevate DEI webinar series. This is a series, diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of our strategic priorities here at the Chamber of Commerce. And we also, in partnership with the City of Tempe, who has a similar emphasis, they sponsor this series. So we thank the City of Tempe for their partnership. And without further ado, I'd like to share. So this first session is leadership strategies for women in male-dominated industries. That is a topic that we've been getting a lot of feedback in, both on the how to navigate it, and it is becoming more prominent, which is both I think are great. And so we're joined by a very dynamic group today, and I will introduce them and then have them give you a little bit more information about themselves. We have Latasha Causey, who is the president of NASCAR's Phoenix Raceway. Thank you for joining us, Latasha. We have Sue Rigler, who is the owner and founder of 100 Mile Brewing here in Tempe, a great watering hole plus, wonderful food and drink menu. And Allie Martin, who worked with the Arizona Coyotes and Tampa Bay Lightning, both in at the growth that they've had. And so thank you all for joining this morning. I'm going to go in the same order. Latasha, if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and why this topic stands out to you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here with you guys. I, as mentioned, am Latasha Causey. I am the president of Phoenix Raceway. I've been in this role for a little over a year and a half. I am a Phoenix native, so I've been here in business for over 20 years here in Phoenix. Majority of the roles that I have held, I've always been in a male-dominated space. I was in finance prior to sports. So this topic is really important because that's how I have lived my entire career. So I'm excited to be here with both Sue and Allison.
Thank you very much. And Sue.
Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm Sue Rigler. As Colin said, I am the owner and founder of 100 Mile Brewing Company. We're located on the north side of Tempe Town Lake. And I actually am an ASU alum. And before this as well, I know, go Devils. But before this, I actually also was in the beer industry and a very male-dominated industry. And I walked into my first sales meeting at my company, and out of 85 participants, there was one sales rep, and that was me. That I walked in, and I was like, all of them were males, and I walked in and I just gasped. I went, ugh. So, but that, you know, that doesn't intimidate me. And ASU alum, microbiology major, and just proud to be here on this panel of some pretty badass women, two badass women. Yes.
Thank you. You had it right. There's definitely three. Go ahead, Allison.
Good morning. I'm Allie Martin. I spent a total of 17 years in sports and entertainment with the Tampa Bay Lightning hockey team. I was with Topgolf and then the Coyotes most recently, and definitely male-dominated industries. I've always been drawn to that, and I started out in my 20s, and I'm happy to say I've seen a lot of growth and a lot of change, and there's definitely still room to go there. So very excited to be part of this conversation.
Well, thank you all for joining us. You guys definitely touched on the industries that you all are in, but can you share a little bit more about the challenges that you've faced? I know that you've touched, Sue, particularly. I'll start with you. You talked a little bit about walking into that first sales room and what you experienced, but can you talk about that now from the industry you're in, what that challenge has meant to you, and maybe what you've learned coming out of it?
Yes, they're out of the breweries in the United States. There's over 10,000 breweries in the United States. only 2% of those are women owned. So that's a pretty alarming statistic, and I'm proud to be in that 2% of women owned breweries. So the challenges that I face are one of the things is people like look at me and they don't think that they go, oh, are you the manager? Are you the, they don't recognize me. And then I say I'm the owner of the brewery and they're like, oh, kind of taken back. So not that that's a challenge, but it's kind of a very common reaction in this industry. But, you have to have thick skin and be really resilient and I've learned right now is just literally in the saying, take one day at a time, has never meant so much in this industry. It's like, it's whatever comes my way. I have confidence and, the ability to kind of move on. And talk about, mentors and leaders. I have a lot of women in this industry as well, in the brewing industry, that are my mentors, and even though it is a male dominated industry, it's like I have a safe space with a lot of other co-owned or women in the industry that have taught me how to lead meetings. Because in the brewing industry, I mean, that's one thing that I've learned here is, the business component of the brewing side as well. So yeah, I'm super proud to be in this industry and a role model and a mentor to those up and coming aspiring women that want to get into the industry.
Thank you for that. And we'll definitely dive a little bit more into mentorship, as you mentioned. Latasha, I'm going to turn to you. I know that personally, coming from working in professional sports, I definitely saw it firsthand, not nearly at the level and at the breadth that you have. So tell us a little bit more about your experience within the industry and some of the challenges that you may have faced.
Yeah, you know what? I think, Colin, for me, as I mentioned a little earlier, I've always been in a male-dominated space. So Sue mentioned about the three of us collectively being badass women. There's something when you are alone and when you are by yourself, it creates this level of resiliency. It creates this level of fight in you. So I know that at every meeting I'm supposed to be there. When people talk about a seat around the table, I have the seat. I take the seat because I know I belong there, but it's just how I've been. That's just how my career has been, and that's just been part of who I am. I think the bigger challenge is those that are coming alongside me or behind me. You want to open up doors for other women to be in spaces like we are, right? And so for me, I don't get offended by the little things, right? When if you will, if a man says something about a woman, sometimes I always have a good comeback, right? So I'm always going to say something, but not all women can do that, and not all women can handle that. And so really the challenge becomes, how do you prepare then that next generation of leaders to be ready to be a president of the Raceway? And I have twofold, right? In NASCAR and in the NASCAR space, not only am I a woman, but I'm the first Black woman to run a track. So I'm by myself and the only person of color just in general running a track. And so, I have to have this level of confidence. I have to have really thick skin all of the time, not just NASCAR. Fortunately, NASCAR, I don't know how much people out there know about NASCAR, but it does have some perceptions. But if you actually are in the sport and you are in the business, it's a really great place to be. And it has evolved and it has come a really long way. So it's not as hard to be a woman or a woman of color in this space. It's really my challenge comes from I want people to really be in this space of like, you can be a badass woman too, and I want you to be in this space with me. And it's hard to teach. It's hard to teach that.
Thank you for sharing. Allie, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, when I first started in the industry, there were times where I was the only woman on the team that I was working with, and I felt a little bit like an island. And I tried really hard to fit in and be one of the guys. And it wasn't until I embraced, I'm not one of the guys, and I can be, but I'm not. And until I really embraced my true self, I wasn't able to grow as much. And I think it's just important to support other women. We are not each other's competition. We are each other's best support. And I did learn that the hard way, but I think I've seen the change very positively over the years, and I think women are realizing that we're not alone and that we do have support, even if it's outside our organization, but still with another team or another part of the industry. And so I found myself just gravitating towards other women and wanting to let girls and women coming behind me know I'm here for you. I've been there. I'm a shoulder to cry on, an ear to listen. I'll be your cheerleader, and really just creating that camaraderie that I did not have at the beginning of my career. So, yeah, not one of the guys. And now I'm proud to say that.
I appreciate you saying that and sharing that. And Latasha, you said something earlier, then I want to go from you to Allie on this one, to dive a little bit deeper, because it triggered something in my mind. In our profession, there's about 7,200 chambers in the US, and about 4% of them have folks that look like me that are leading them. And for a lot of my career, I dealt with this, and I'm curious if you all have at any point, when you hear imposter syndrome, is that something that you ever had to deal with, being female in a male dominated industry? And if so, how did you manage that? I know, Latasha, you started mentioning that you kind of owned and occupied the space that you had in the room, but if folks that are listening that may not be in that same mental space as you, what advice would you give?
You want me to answer or Allie? I know me.
I'll start with you and then I'll go to Allie. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think Allie actually mentioned it the best, is that you have to get to a space where you are okay with being authentically you. I haven't necessarily always been in this space. It's just, I feel like I developed this skin, I developed the thickness around it just because I've always been by myself, and you're like always fighting, you never give up the fight. So you're just always in this space of like, hey, here's where I should be, here's where I know I need to be. And so I think that, we are our toughest critics on ourselves, and we have to give ourselves grace, right? So we all have bad days, right? I'm like, dang, like, why did I do this? This did not go exactly the way that it planned. And that still happens right now today, right? None of us are perfect. And so I think that we have to get to a space, and it takes sometimes other people helping us get to that space, but you have to be okay with coming into your own. And sometimes it takes an event, sometimes it takes like an experience, it takes like something happening. It doesn't have to be something bad, but it just takes something happening for you to embrace, okay, you know what? Like Allie said, I'm not one of the dudes. I'm actually who I am, and I'm going to show up just like that all the time.
That's great. Allie, what would you like to add to that, or maybe speak to from your perspective?
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is very real. I may or may not have had a little bit of it getting into this call today. And at the beginning of my career, I felt that I had to work harder to prove myself. I was the first one in the morning. I was the last one to leave. I had to out hustle and prove that I deserved to be there. And I think the turning point for me was, and it sounds so silly looking back, but I never got invited to go to lunch with the guys. And I kept feeling like, well, I'm missing out on something, or important conversations are happening and I'm not part of it. And I finally got the invite, and they talked about video games the whole time. And that was that aha moment of like, well, I'm not actually missing anything, but it's also okay to invite myself along and not wait for that invitation, and become okay with not always being included as well. And so it just all came back to really coming into my own of, well, this is who I am. I am going to work hard. I am going to hustle. That's not going to change. But I also maybe don't need to be the last one here, or it's okay. And without being too long-winded, I think the biggest shift for me was when I became a mom. My entire priorities changed. And then I still wanted to show up at work and be who I had always been. I'm a high achiever naturally, but I learned what was really important in life. And some of that pressure kind of came off my shoulders at that point, when I realized it's okay to prioritize family. And it's okay if everyone doesn't think that I'm the hardest worker, because I know my worth and I know how hard I work.
Yeah, no, that's so great. Getting to that place where you know your worth and can convey that or not, and just be comfortable in the space you're in. So, knowing that you belong, just like on today's meeting, you belong where you're at. So even with a little bit of imposter syndrome you're dealing with, you're in the right space. Sue, what would you like to add to that?
Yes, and this is a career change for me too. So I feel like every day, I live with the imposter syndrome because I'm traveling and I'm learning. I wanted to open up a brewery and now I'm a restaurateur. So that is like, I fight every day with, how do I do this? Am I good enough? Am I doing it? I have to literally give myself a pep talk every single day to be strong, go out there, and then something happens. And in this industry, it's so fast paced that there's always at least one thing, if not a handful of fires that I have to put out. And I get beaten up, but every day, then that's why I say one day at a time. I pick myself up. It's a new day. It's a strong day. And, I have a team around me that supports me. So, but definitely it's challenging and, you just kind of keep moving on. Right. And go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was agreeing with you saying, yep, that's exactly right. Well, I'm going to kick it back to you because you said something earlier that I don't want to miss. You talked about mentorship, and right now you just talked about a team around you. And I think most of you would agree, whether it's your team, your tribe, whatever vernacular you want to use to describe that. Can you speak to what mentorship may have meant to you, particularly changing industries, and then how you've gone about gathering those folks in your corner?
Mentorship. Well, I can't talk. I think I need a beer. I can't talk.
I'll join you.
Okay, good. See you there in what, 45 minutes? But mentorship is absolutely critical and it's paramount. It's huge. Otherwise you're on an island and we all know that doesn't work. I have a lot of actually mentors in the beer industry, as well as that's my home and that's where I know, and that's the depth of my knowledge and that's my education. But outside of that is really where I seek the most mentorship, at least for me being a mentee, not a mentor, is in the financial and the restaurant component of it, where I really, I feel like I said a fish out of water sometimes. Well, not sometimes, a lot of times. And I'm learning. I always say that, I started like as a newborn or, an infant, and now I'm probably up to preschool or kindergarten in my knowledge. Hey, we've been open a little over a year and I've learned so much in that industry. I have a lot to learn, but I definitely, my mentors, I actually have a great mentor through the SCORE program. I was funded by a Small Business Association loan. So it's SCORE. So they have semi-retired or retired professionals in fields that want to give back and mentor. So that's a great resource, and it has been very helpful for that. But role playing, I have another mentor that literally asked me, she said, "Do you know how to run a meeting?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, no." So she gave me her agenda and she, just coaching me, and we did role playing. So absolutely critical to have mentors, and they are sounding boards, really.
Thank you. Allie, what would you say to that same question?
Yeah, early in my career, I don't think I fully understood what mentorship was, but I definitely did know how to use my resources. And when I didn't know something, how to seek out someone who did know it to help me. And now at this point in my career, I try really hard to be a mentor to younger women starting out in the industry, sharing what I've learned, reminding them that they're amazing and they have the right to be there, and hopefully being able to give a little bit of my knowledge so that their path is a little smoother. But I do have mentors now as well. And again, to Sue's point, I don't know how I would get through without them, and having that sounding board or someone who knows just a little bit more than me and can help either remind me that I'm on the right track or help give me some options to get there.
Wonderful. Latasha?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I would add to that is that, for me too, like Sue, I'm just starting out in NASCAR. There's a difference between being a sports fan and working in sports. Huge difference of that, and so it really is a matter of identifying individuals that, are not per se, in your role, in your space. It's okay to have just a variety of individuals around you. And I think sometimes as you continue to grow and develop in your roles, you think of the term mentorship and you're like, do I need a mentor? You don't necessarily have to call it that, but you do need a crew of people that you can bounce ideas off of or run things by or role play. You can never we all have to be in a space of being open to learning. I feel like I learn something new every day, whether it's with NASCAR or just life in general. And we have to be open to those experiences and those opportunities. And the only other thing I would add about mentorship is at some point in individuals' careers, depending on where they are, you have to be able to determine the difference between a mentor and an advocate. Advocacy is also extremely important. You need individuals who realize how hard you work, who realize what you bring to the table, because there are times when you don't necessarily see those things in yourself, but someone else does. And it prepares you for another opportunity, whether that is professionally, personally. And so you do also have to figure out the balance of advocates and mentors.
I love that. And so as you figure out those that are going to help move you on the path and maybe help elevate you, we've talked about believing in yourself, the direction that you're going into, occupying the room, having a village, if you will. Can you guys talk a little bit about maybe some of the trainings or professional development that you guys had before or are going to seek in the future, and the impact that may have on your roles? And Allie, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah. So I definitely didn't get into the industry the usual way. There were not programs for sports management or marketing at ASU when I was there. I just knew that I loved hockey and didn't know anything about working in a front office or even what a front office looked like. But once I got into it, I think for me, what helped me was curious intelligence and just wanting to know what I didn't know. And so I would seek out people in different departments. I'm also a big picture thinker. So I want to know, how does what I do affect you on a daily basis? And how can I make it easier for you? Or how can I make it a better experience for my my guest, because I understand the way it works? And so for me, it was just really diving in and wanting to learn as much as possible and approaching other departments, volunteering to help them on game days when I didn't have my own stuff to do, or community events when things were out in the community. And I think that helped me have a better understanding of the industry, but also create a reputation as someone that you can go to. She'll help out if she needs to. She's willing to learn. And just, again, diving in. And anytime a program is offered that there was a training, I always wanted to be part of that. I always wanted to learn as much as I could. And I really credit a lot of that with growing in my career and being able to transition from different roles.
Thank you, Latasha.
Yeah, for me, kind of similar to Ali, like, while you have your traditional school education, I have all of those things. I like to think much broader and bigger than that. And I'm very curious as well, always asking questions, but just finding people. I like to go and see it. So doing job shadows still to this day, I love to go around and shadow people in various roles, just to understand, like, how does this actually work? What does a typical day look like for this individual? But I do think that, now in my career as well, I do have it on my list of things to do, is to go to a business school. So like a Harvard Business School, one of those, because of the people that you're around and what you can learn from those individuals, whether they're in sports, whether they're just in business, those types of things. So now it's just a much broader, bigger, again, and that's all in my curiosity, because all I'm going to do is ask a million questions of those individuals and pick their mind. So I just try to think of non-traditional ways, but then also being part of groups. Like, for example, I was part of Valley Leadership. And before I went into Valley Leadership, in the beginning, I was like, what could I possibly learn out of this? But you'd be surprised the amount of things that you can learn, not only about the state, but the people that are involved as well. So just thinking differently about the various types of programs that you go to, maybe not necessarily traditional.
I think that's great. And ask away. You're anything that you have questions about that you don't ask, you're not going to learn. So I think that's, I'm of that same philosophy. Sue, what would you say to that same question?
Right. So I obviously had a career change in my 50s later in life. So my career path is like a career change right now. So I'm a sponge. I'm a sponge learning right now. So in my early 50s, I actually went to when I had the aha moment when I saw a microscope in a craft brewery. I'm like, oh, I want to open a brewery. I actually enrolled back at UC San Diego in their brewing program. So that was a huge component of my continuing education. And then right now I'm currently enrolled in the ASU, their ASU leadership program. I'm in cohort 6. So the double pack here. And right, there we go. So, but it's actually what ASU leadership is. It's an in-depth look at why ASU is the #1 university or in innovation. So we go around and tour all the campuses, as well as what is a great component is, besides the networking, we have leadership, the presentations by leaders in business, in the military, ethics, and nonprofits that come and present. So we actually have contact with them as well now. So it's opened up a lot of doors and yeah, learning opportunities for me.
Wonderful. Any other additional thoughts on that one before we move to the next topic? All right, so I guess the question that I had, if you were to rewind back to the beginning, and Sue, yours may be a little bit more recent in this new career, but rewind back to the beginning of your time in your career, is there advice that you would have given to yourself that maybe you give to somebody on here that, hey, if I know what I know now, I would do this differently, or I would make sure to do this, or I would do this in this order? And Sue, you're already unmuted, so let's start with you.
Right. It's looking back, I mean, not my whole entire career, but what I would absolutely do is focus on communication and with the team. I don't think you can communicate enough. I don't think you can over communicate. I don't think you can say things too many different ways to different people, but just internally in my company, we're working on that every day. So I would say, learn communication skills, and resilience is, you have to be, if you want to be an entrepreneur and you're going to be in any type of business, really, it doesn't have to just be entrepreneurship, but thick skin, I've heard here, resilience, problem solving as well. And what I've also learned is from the get-go, standard policies, operating procedures, and a great project management software, so you can keep everything organized. So, organizational skills.
That's great. Ali, what would you add to that?
I agree with all of that. I think when I look back on my early career, I should have asked for more feedback. I was always a high performer. I was always the top of the sales charts. I would sit in reviews and meetings and just, yep, you're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. And in hindsight, I can look back and see, well, I could have probably learned how to have a different delivery when talking, in meetings, or just asking for feedback and being really open to constructive criticism and seeking it out to be better would have served me really well. But at the time I didn't know. And just when you're told, yep, you're doing a great job, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm doing a great job. And it goes back to imposter syndrome too, of, well, they say I'm doing a good job, but am I? And younger me didn't ask that question. And now I would ask that question.
Appreciate that. And Latasha, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going back to my younger self, I mean, I think a couple of things. One, I would tell myself it's okay to fail. And actually those failures are probably what's going to make you stronger for where you're going to be one day. And so I would say that's probably the biggest thing. I think, again, like I said earlier, we're so hard on ourselves when we do any little thing wrong. And so I think that's probably the biggest. The other is cherish your time. Our time goes so fast. And I feel like, I'm with Ali, like I'm a super duper hard worker, but there are times when you have to prioritize. People often ask me, how do you have work-life balance? I don't have work-life balance. I prioritize, right? I prioritize what's important, and you have to accept that at some point. You have to prioritize what's important to you. For me, like Ali, right, my family is really important. There's certain things I do not miss with my family. I know, Colin, we talked earlier about my travel schedule, but if I have to take a red eye flight because I don't want to miss baseball for my kid, then I'm going to do that. And so it's really just trying to figure out how to cherish your time and to take care of you, because if you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. And I think it just goes really fast. And if you can learn that early, you'll just be so much more, not balanced, but better.
I think that's I heard someone the other day say, you have to remember not only to give yourself grace, but you have to remember when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And I hadn't really heard it from that perspective, that every decision you make with your time is moving you towards something, but also away from something else. So however you prioritize that. We've talked about, obviously, diversity. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit towards the equitable side of things. How do we create equitable workplaces? Latasha, I'm going to start with you, being in an industry where you and I spoke when I came out to visit the track, and my first experience was a pretty amazing one in Talladega, but it was like a completely shift from somebody that knows basketball and football and baseball and tennis and golf. So what does equitable workforce look like for you, and how do you create an area that fosters diversity?
Yeah. So, and for those of us like me in sports, right, not only am I having to make sure that I create an equitable space for our employees, but as well for our fan base, individuals that are coming to participate in the experience that we provide. So from a workforce perspective, it's almost the same, but from a workforce perspective, one thing that I pride myself on, besides building relationship and truly getting to know people, is just making sure that I allow the opportunity for people to come up and show up at work as authentically who they are, no matter who they are. I know, Colin, when you came out, while I had just been recently recovering from an injury, I was wearing Nikes, but that's the space that I'm in, right? And I feel like when I brought my vibe, if you will, to the Raceway, one of the things that it did, it just really opened up creativity for people. So now you see a lot more Nikes, or you see whatever tennis shoes, sneakers, a little bit more casual space that people can be in, but it allows them the opportunity to be in a space like, now I'm not worried about this stuffy blazer that I'm wearing right now and these high heels that are hurting my toes. I'm focused on what experience am I going to provide then to the fans, or what work am I going to do for the Raceway. And so I think that is probably the biggest thing, is just making sure that I set up an environment, but also for those of us who are in a space of being able to hire individuals, you have to make sure you get out of your comfort zone of hiring individuals that are all the same, me included, right? Like, as a person of color and as a woman of color, doesn't mean that everybody on my team has to be another woman of color, right? I have to be open to those ideas of hiring the right talent, but making sure that everyone doesn't look the same. And so I think that that's really important for the environment, and that then translates as well to our experience that we provide to our fans.
Thank you. Ali, how would you answer that question in terms of fostering diversity and equitable workplaces?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know what I don't know. And so I've learned that it's really important to ask. Ask to hear other people's stories, ask to hear about their experiences. I've lived in a lot of different states. I've lived outside New York City. I've lived in a really rural town in Washington State that had an active KKK chapter. I've lived in the desert. I've lived in Florida. And I consider myself a very open-minded person. I'm open to diversity. And I've participated in a couple of DE&I cohorts recently where I learned that I'm not as knowledgeable as I think I am. I've had my experiences, but I haven't had anyone else's experiences. And it's important to ask, what is that experience? What is it like being the only person of color on a team? Just because I've been the only woman doesn't mean I understand that same experience. Or what does accessibility look like to someone? And so it's important that we have dialogue and that we really ask the questions and listen to the answers. And to Latasha's point, then we can allow them to show up authentically because we've created that space and we've made that effort. And it really, you just have to dive a little deeper than the surface to get there, but it ultimately will make the team stronger and allow more voices at the table and more creativity and more brainstorming. And it might even bring up more questions that you haven't considered, but that's how we grow and get better.
Well, I think that's great. Sue, what would you add to that? What does that look like for you at 100 Mile, and what does it look like maybe in your past?
Sure. So at 100 Mile, just first of all, in the location we are in the heart of Tempe, that allows itself for a lot of diversity, just for a labor pool and just collectively with students. And then if you look at my team, I have about 50 employees, front of house and back of house. And if you look at them, I think we're doing a great job of hiring and having diversity on our team. So I do want to pat myself on the back and our team for that. So, and then taking it a step further, also what brings it to the forefront is also what I think is like cognitive diversity too, how people think. We have, as I said, we have fires and we have to solve problems every day. So if we all think the same, then we might all come up with the same answer, but that might not be the best answer for us right now. So by, we have students, young, we have, old people like me on the team, so I love their energy, their young energy. And we have, the Brewers they have, an engineering background. So I always like to problem solve with other people's ideas, and I call it brainstorming. So just bring, the collective ideas and kind of have conversations about what is the best answer for our company in the long run.
Thank you for that. And Sue, maybe it's something in the beer, but I think you're aging in reverse. So don't worry about that at all. I do have a question aligned with, I guess, kind of building a path, because you guys have all individually forged a path that many that are in similar space may be afraid to go on for whatever reason, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's friends and family and others that are reminding them of why it won't work, or whether they look up and see industries where there's not a lot of representation from women. Can you speak to what you are doing or be willing to do to try to build future pathways or build future leaders? Because I do think I've got a philosophy of lift as you climb. If we're going to see more of us, or in this case, more of you all in scenarios, then you'd also want to kind of build that pathway. So what does that look like? We'll start with you, Latasha, and then I'll go to Allie and then Sue.
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but as individuals and being in a space and being able to hire, I think that we have to collectively look at who we're hiring and provide those opportunities, but also provide a space, making sure that, in the space that we're in, things that maybe I experienced when I was younger in my career in a male-dominated space, creating an opportunity for individuals, again, to be authentically who they are and help them grow and learn in that space. But we have to give those individuals a chance as well. So I'm always looking to give, it's just one of the things with me, I'm always looking to give the underdog the chance, not your traditional person that, now if it's a high-powered job that we really need, if you will, a role that has a specific skill in, then yes, obviously. But when there is when you have flexibility on a role and an opportunity, I'm always the one that, it hasn't failed me yet, that gives that underdog the opportunity to do that and create the right tools to help make them successful, because we can't forget about that part, because you can hire them, but what's going to make them stay and what's going to help them be successful in what they're doing.
Wonderful. Ollie?
Yeah, I actually really love this question. During my time with the Tampa Bay Lightning, again, I went into it not really understanding sports business at all, just thinking it'd be fun to work for a hockey team. And so I actually worked with the Girl Scouts and we created some programming. We did learn to skate clinics. We did career fairs where girls got to come and talk to the different women who worked in different departments of the organization. We did behind the scenes tours. We also had an arena football team. So I did programming with football. We did football clinics. We did locker room tours, and really just giving the exposure that these opportunities exist. And if this is something you're interested in, there is a path for you. Especially girls sports is on the rise right now. I think we all are at least aware of it with the women's soccer team and the pay equity with women's basketball and Caitlin Clark and the incredible basketball we just saw over the weekend. But not all girls are going to be a professional athlete or have access to that, but they could potentially work in the field if they know that that's available to them. So I went way, way back and started trying to create awareness and create those programs for girls, again, working with the Girl Scouts. So that was kind of my way to contribute and share, like, hey, I didn't know about this, but I want you to know about it so that you can make choices if this is something you're in.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And Sue, what would you like to add?
Sure. Paving pathways is, well, one, if we have a whole brewery there. So I always am inviting people to come in. There's a lot of opportunities to learn. If you want to learn the science part of it, you want to learn the business part of it. Opening up to my team, opening up to, we get brewery tours to, ASU actually is going to be coming over and doing part of their fermentation class. So, just opening up areas that we can offer the community and others that want to learn more about brewing. And also, I am involved in it's called Pink Boot Society, which is a nonprofit for women in the industry and the alcoholic beverage industry. It used to just be beer, but now it's wine, it's mead, it's spirits. So we raise money and awareness for women in the industry and for scholarships and educational funds.
Wonderful. I think all of those are great. I remember when I was in California prior, there was a community I was in, and we used to do an event called Her World that started with only about 100 people. It eventually became about 75 high schools, and they were rising juniors. And it was to introduce them to STEM and STEM careers, because those are traditionally male-dominated industries. And so love hearing about the things that you all are sharing. Have a couple of questions that popped up in the chat. So this was what somebody asked. As a younger woman, I've dealt with those that are older in our careers, not supporting younger women and building up the next generation in a company. Any advice if you are in that position where you're looking for that leadership and that support, but are in environments where that's either not present or even the opposite? And let's start. I guess I was going to let anybody jump in that wants to, but Sue, do you want to start?
I'm just reading this question to make sure I understand it. So, as a young woman, I've dealt with. I'm not quite sure I understand this. Are they asking, can you?
I think with the way I'm reading it, that they're looking for advice. They are a younger woman in the industry, and they're not getting the support from maybe more seasoned women in the industry, and to help build up their kind of the next generation in the company. And so how do you navigate that as somebody that's younger in an environment that doesn't foster that?
Got it. First of all, it makes me sad to even read this, because this should never happen. I mean, me as a more mature woman, I embrace the young. As I said, we have so many students and young, and they're eager, and they, want to learn. And I can't even imagine anybody not wanting to support that. So with that being said, I mean, that just makes me sad. And, I would say keep reaching out. If someone isn't willing to help you, just go to the next person, and I bet you the next person will help you out, because 99% of people will be willing to help out. So it's unfortunate that, whoever this is that asked this question came upon this experience in their path. And please keep reaching out. Come to me. I'll help you. I don't know who you are, but come to Under a Mile.
Latasha, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Sue. I mean, it's sad that it happens, but it's a reality as well. Sometimes as women, we're our toughest critics and our biggest supporters at the same time. Like sometimes we feel like there's only room for one of us at the table, but that's never true. And so I would tell this individual of don't dwell on that particular person. It's really sad that that's happening, but you have to seek it from somewhere else. And I wouldn't continue to seek it from that same individual or that person. And you'd be surprised, while that person is probably in your mind, the one in power or the one that has the ability to make decisions, there are others, and others see and recognize that without you having to tell anyone, right? Those actions speak way louder than those words. And so I would say to overcome that, really focus on getting that support from somewhere else.
Thank you. Allie, anything to add to that?
Oh, I have so many thoughts about this one. I think too, when you look at generations, especially in male-dominated industries, the women older than us really had to fight to get where they are and really had to prove themselves and may have had to present inauthentically. I know my grandma was a director at AT&T when she retired, and she wore men's clothes to work. And she is very feminine, always had makeup, always looked really put together, but she felt that she had to dress in a more masculine way to be taken seriously. And so again, for me, it comes down to curious intelligence and just maybe asking this person, I'd love to hear about your experience and how you got where you were. You know, what has changed? Just acknowledge that they may have had a harder path than you did to get where they're at. And I think the world changes very, very quickly. I remember when I first started with the Lightning, we were not allowed on social media while we were at work. And now every team has someone running their TikTok, someone running their Instagram, someone running their social media has become a huge part of that everyday fabric. And so it can be a little scary for people to have to change and adapt when things are moving so quickly. And so I think just looking at it from their perspective of what have they gone through to get to where they are, what were their challenges. I know sometimes I look back and go, gosh, these kids have it so much easier than I did. I had to fight so much harder to get where I am. It's just about, again, asking the questions and trying to find that understanding and sharing that respect as like, you're someone I look up to, and you know, I want to continue to move upward as well. And I'd love to pick your brain on how you did that. And they may not be receptive and responsive to speaking with you, but keep asking and you'll find someone who will.
Yep.
But also keep in mind, like their path probably looked extremely different than yours. And they may have had to fight harder or overcome challenges that you may not have today.
No, that's all great. And I'm going to move to this next. These two questions are very similar, so I'm going to combine them, but I'd also add on what you guys just stated. Sometimes that ally is not going to be in your company. It may be somebody that is at a competitor or another location or what have you, but not to be too discouraged if you don't find it within your organization. Now, this one has, how do you build respect and deal with disrespect due to being a woman? And then the next question, similarly, how would you handle situations where you put in the effort to be part of a team or achieve many accomplishments, but are met with negativity, no acknowledgement, or blatant rejection? I will start with Latasha on that one, and then we'll go to Sue and Allie.
You give me the hard one first. You could, I think from a respect standpoint, I mean, I kind of mentioned this just a little bit earlier, is, you create that on your, if you will, on your own by the way, the actions, following up and doing the things that you say you're going to do. Building relationships, all of those types of things. I always say, don't let your the words that you say, don't let them become non-existent, because your actions are different. And so I would say, a lot of times people ask a question of like, well, what is it like being the only girl or being the only woman or being this, sometimes I don't even think about it anymore. I mean, I know that there was a time when I did, but I think that you cannot continuously focus. You have to acknowledge that it's there, it exists, and that's what it is. But that is what it is. And so now you have to You know, I know Ali mentioned earlier, hey, when they don't invite you to lunch, you invite yourself. I always say, hey, if I don't golf, but when the guys go golfing, I'm going too, right? Like I'll invite myself. I'll drive the golf cart. I'm not going to golf, but I want to go hang out and get the same experiences that you do. So you have to get respect by being able to show up in those spaces and being comfortable with showing up, you know, in those particular spaces. But what I will tell you is when you have that negative side of things, you have to determine at some point when it is time to move on. There are certain environments that don't actually deserve you. Not that you don't deserve to be in that space, because you don't, but they don't deserve you and deserve your energy to get to that point as well. And there are other opportunities out there, even though sometimes it seems like there might not be. But I would say don't never stay in an extremely negative environment for an extended period of time, because your skills and your life could be so much better somewhere else.
That's great. Sue, what would you add to that?
That's exactly the point that I was going to say. You know, you can hang on for so long, but one thing I would say in that situation is ask questions as well. Maybe go to your supervisor or, you know, say, hey, am I doing something off base here, or how can I improve? You know, kind of have, I think Ali, you mentioned this earlier, is like, ask some questions, ask for feedback. So maybe there's something that you're self-reflecting on or taking it in and thinking that it's you, but it's not. If you have an open conversation with your supervisor or the owner or whatever, just have open conversations about, you know, whatever it is you're feeling, constructive conversations about that. And I do think about the respect thing, or disrespect is, it goes back again, I'm going to say resilience and thick skin is, you know, not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to, you know, be respectful, just the world we live in, situations we live in. So you do have to, again, have confidence and a lot of resilience to, you know, kind of water on a duck's back, if you will. So those would be my 2 points here.
Thank you. And Ali, would you like to round us out?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sue and Latasha really touched on it. Unfortunately, having thick skin is important, and it kind of sucks to sit here and say that, like, oh well, you know, you just kind of have to let it roll off your back, and it almost gets me angry because I don't think men are given that advice. I think they're taught to stand up for themselves, and women are too, to an extent. But it comes back to knowing your own worth and having a really good support system, having those mentors and advocates, whether in your organization or outside of your organization, where you can share those feelings. And you know, it hurts when you feel disrespected or you feel like your accomplishments are not celebrated for how hard you worked. And you may or may not be able to change that culture where you work, but having that good support system, being part of organizations that build you up and lift you up, are really how I got through some of those earlier years, and finding satisfaction in knowing that you are doing a good job and you know your worth, and not seeking it outside yourself. But I wish there were better answers, honestly, because I think all of those are very much putting the onus on the person rather than the culture and the organization. But it does have to start with you. And then if you're comfortable, speak up, go to a supervisor, go to HR, say, I'm not okay with this, or I'm not happy with how this happened. But yeah, it has to come from within you, knowing your worth and having cheerleaders around you that can help you put things into perspective.
I think that's great. We've got 2 more questions. I'm going to see if we can get to both of them. And Ali, I'm going to come to you first. So this one, kind of what you guys acknowledged of women being hard on themselves with career changes and the learning curve. What is advice that you would give on the best way to manage the curve and get past it quickly, but efficiently? So not necessarily skipping through steps, but not spending your whole career in that phase.
I can speak on this one.
Okay, go for it, Sue. You've done this before recently, as I would say.
Career changes, yes. Well, there is I guess the best advice is it's not going to be easy. And it's just kind of, if it boils down literally to passion. If you, no matter what age you are, no matter what you're doing in life, it's like, if you really truly want something, if you want this career change or whatever, just be passionate about it. And it really, everything else will come. You know, the confidence will come, the fear will subside, and just kind of forge on, really. There's no easy way though. You know, a learning curve. They're just dive in. And again, what we've just said here is really surround yourself with some good mentors, and, you know, lean on people.
Thank you for that. Ali, Latasha, anything to add? Okay.
Patience is a virtue. More than ever.
Very true. Go ahead, Ali.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of ask for help. Like I said, I don't know what I don't know. So I always try to identify someone in my organization that I can go to for feedback or suggestions. I'm big on knowing your resources. You know, does your organization, what do they offer? Do they have employee resource groups? Do they offer training? I recently learned that through a lot of local libraries, you have access to online training like Gale courses, Udemy. If you want to learn a little more about something, you know, maybe take a free course. Or I'm a big reader, like find some articles on the industry, but don't be afraid to ask for help or feel like you have to learn it all overnight. The learning curve is usually expected. And again, I'm not afraid to ask for help and to admit when I don't know something. And I apologize that I don't remember. I think Latasha said this, but it might have been Sue. Don't be afraid to fail. Mistakes are fine. We learn from mistakes. One of my mentors taught me it's okay to make mistakes, just make new ones. And I live by that every day. So
No, that's
that would be
great.
my
Fail
advice.
forward. Latasha, anything to add on that one?
I mean, the only thing I would add on that is just an emphasis on patience as a virtue. Right? I mean, the learning curve is massive. I'm in the same space, right, as Sue, transitioning to a totally different career. So, be humble and pack your patience.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you guys one last question. It's going to catch you off guard. So I'm going to ask the question, thank everybody for joining us, and come back to your answer, because you're going to probably want a minute to think about it. What would you say is your superpower? So if you had to come up with one superpower, and how has it helped you transcend your industry? Sue, for you navigating to a new one. So while you're thinking about that answer, thank you all for joining us today. If you enjoyed this conversation, I'd encourage you to join us on June 4th for our Leadership and Diversity Conference. Latasha will be joining again for a fireside chats, and we'll have another great panel conversation, as well as some other recognition. So information's on that on tempechamber.org. You'll also get a survey after this. Like I said, this is the first in the series, and we'd love to get feedback from you all. So having said that, I'm going to go to Sue first. Superpower, what would you say? What's your answer?
Hands down, networking. That's my super.
That's an amazing one, and I will agree with that one for you. Ali, what would you say?
Very similar to Sue's. Building relationships is my superpower.
Okay.
Networking, building relationships, staying in touch with people.
And Latasha, what would you say?
I mean, I was going to say the same thing between relationships and networking, but I'm going to have to go just simply with just the magic, right, that we have as a woman, holistically and collectively, to be able to show up every day and do what we do.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a great way to end our conversation today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Latasha. And Ali, thank you as well. I think this was a great start to a much needed dialogue. And thank you all for attending. Look forward to connecting with you all in the future.
Thank you.
See you for lunch.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.